Okay, this will be the final video in this series. In our last video, we saw three sources of non-Zionist or anti-Zionist rabbis who insisted that the state of Israel has nothing to do with the coming of the Mashiach. In this last video, we're going to see four sources from three different rabbis who are called Religious-Zionists. The first two, from Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, Rav Kook, who we've seen before. The second from his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. And finally, the last one will be Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik. Let's start with Rav Kook himself. Rav Kook we've spoken about many times. He's considered one of the most important figures in religious Zionism. Rav Kook, it's important to know, made Aliyah here to Eretz Yisrael, I believe, around 1910. And he was here during the decades when the preparations for Medinat Yisrael were underway. During the second Aliyah, the third Aliyah, the fourth Aliyah, the fifth Aliyah. But Rav Kook passed away in 1936. And therefore he did not live to see the state of Israel that was founded in 1948. So anything he said about Medinat Yisrael, he was talking about a vision that he had, something that he was able to see was going to happen, something that he envisioned, something that he wanted, but not something he actually saw. So let's just take a look. I'm not going to read everything inside. Rav Kook's language also is very, very, very poetic and difficult. It's not always clear exactly what he means, but we're going to just read a few excerpts from these two sources. So we're on page 216, Chazon HaGeula, the vision of redemption. And he says, remember, let's just remind ourselves what we saw in those previous sources. On the one hand, there are so many reasons to say that all the things that have happened over the last few hundred years and over the last number of decades especially are the fulfillment of all the nevuot of, or the beginning of the fulfillment of the nevuot of Geula, of redemption. But we saw that there were a few things that made people hold back from that. One was the question of whether the Geula, whether the redemption is supposed to happen through human actions or whether it's supposed to be some miraculous thing by God only. And that would have a lot to do with whether we can interpret human actions as part of it. And the second thing had to do with the fact that many of the rabbis were very, very bothered. How can it possibly be that these events, the establishment of the state of Israel and everything surrounding it, are the part of the process of the coming of the Mashiach, when that's supposed to happen as a result of tshuva? And today, so many members of Am Yisrael and of Medinat Yisrael and so many leaders of Medinat Yisrael and the state itself are not observant of halakha. So how could that be? And that was one of the reasons that particularly Rav Shach and also the Lubavitcher Rebbe said there's no way that this can have anything to do with the coming of the Mashiach. So Rav Kook is going to respond to that, even though he lived earlier. He's not exactly responding to those rabbis, but he's responding to people who were saying something similar back in his day. And you're going to see that he has a very different approach. So let's read from the beginning here. Ken, he says, yes. Atchalta de geula vadai holechet amufia lefanenu. Certainly, the beginning of the redemption is here. The redemption has in fact begun. Those who say that this is not the beginning of the geula are wrong. And not only that, it hasn't just begun now, he says. Omnam lo me'ayom itchila ufazo, ach me'az itchila ketza megule lihigalot. Since the very beginning of this process, me'et asher harei Yisrael heichelu la'asot anafim v'laseit pri. I think in one of the earlier videos we mentioned the pasuk in Yechezkel that talks about the mountains blooming, and the statement of the Gemara that we may even mention this in two videos, that the statement in the Gemara that pasuk, when the mountains begin to bloom, when there's fruit growing in Eretz Yisrael again, it means that the redemption is at hand. Rav Kook says that happened already decades ago, and when that happened already was the beginning of the Geula. We're well into the process now. Ve'enei kol choder beruach dat hayu tamid nesuot ki yad Hashem anoheget kol mesibot dorim tafli plaoteha lavi et ha'atchala azot lemala yoter romema. And therefore we've been waiting for this to gather steam and to reach higher and higher and higher levels. And in fact, that was supposed to happen, and in fact, that is happening. Vadai, I'm skipping one line. Vadai kol dodido fake. The beloved is knocking. That's a pasuk in Shir HaShirim that we already mentioned, and we'll come back to that pasuk at the end of this video when we read about Soloveitchik. But for now, it's just an image. God is knocking on the door. God's great light, which moves history, is in fact who Hashem Elokei Yisrael she'anachnu amo b'tzom harito. Hinenu edav adei ad mofia berov zohar mitoch kol ha'mafelim lefales netivot chuko alamim rabim v'amon lumim. Omnam ze hayom shekivinu holechu lavo. So it's happening. And he says it's starting with the external part. Le'et ata hochimu mitgalim tzadav hayoter chitzonim. It's true that right now, the primary elements of the redemption are the physical, external, material elements. We see farms being built. We see towns being built. We see factories being built. We don't see so much of the spirituality. We don't see work beginning on a big dash. We don't see God's presence appearing. We don't see people returning even and doing more mitzvot. We see the physical elements of the Geula. But that's okay. And the people that are making this happen are the people who know how to do this type of thing. Just like Ke'erkam shel HaTzidonim hayod'im lechrot et ha'itzim milvanon livnot Beit Hashem yoter mi b'nei Yisrael. You know, he says when Shlomo HaMelech built the first Beit HaMikdash, he brought in workers from Lebanon, Goyim, who knew how to cut wood. The Lebanon has big trees. They had very, very skilled people who knew how to cut down the trees in Lebanon and knew how to build with those huge pieces of wood. He sent some of those people to Yerushalayim to do the work. Sometimes even non-Jews have skills that are needed to create the physical environment that is necessary for spirituality to take place. And certainly these Jews who are not perfect from a halachic perspective. They're not living Torah lives exactly, but they're doing excruciatingly important work. Let's skip a little bit. Skip to the second paragraph, line 27. Et halevinim el habinyan yecholim laseit gam otam sheinam chodrim el omek soda yishurim asher yashvu ba. Even people who don't fully understand the holy significance of the building can carry the bricks. And those people that are building Medinat Yisrael, whether it's the farmers, whether it's the soldiers, whether it's the leaders of the government, future government at this point, the politicians, they're doing very important work, and that's also part of the redemption. V'lorak laseit halevanim, and they're not just carrying the bricks. They're the ones that are leading the effort right now. But the day will come when we'll reach the point that the spiritual aspects of the state have to be built, and at that point it'll be clear who's following God and who's not. In other words, what Rav Kook is saying is it may very well be that a lot of the people that are involved in building this future state, again, he's talking before the state, are not Torah observant people. But that doesn't mean that they're not part of this process. There's precedent for it, and that's what's going on here. They are part and parcel of the process. This is, in fact, the Geula, and the fact that it's being done by non-religious people does not take anything away from that. He says more along the same line here, but let's skip to the second source from Rav Kook on page 217. This is a shorter source. Here he talks about this state that he's seeing in his future vision. When it reaches its ideal sense, what's it supposed to be like? And he says, Ein ha-medina ha-osher ha-yoter elyon shel adam. Don't think that a medina, that a country, is in itself the fulfillment of humanity's highest aspirations. It's not. A country has its purpose, but it's not the ultimate goal. Zeh, what I just said, nitan laheamer b'medina regila. That applies to a regular, ordinary country. Sheina oleh le'erech yoter gadol mechevrat achrayut gedola. Which, after all, what's a country? A country is people get together and they they set up systems so that they can all live. We need to organize our lives and take care of everything and make sure that everybody is being treated fairly and all of that. Okay, so a country normally has a functional purpose. שנשארו המון האידאות שהיא מטרת החיים של האנושיות מרחפים ממעלה ואינם נוגעים בה. So in an ordinary country, the purpose of the country, of the government, of its institutions, is to manage the technicalities of life. But the great ideals that people live for, though religion or justice or all sorts of other things, those remain floating up in the air and they're not involved in the country itself. מה שאין כן מדינה שהיא ביסודה אידיאלית. But a Jewish state, the Jewish state is going to be, is in its intrinsic essence, ideal. This country that we're going to build is itself the fulfillment of the highest ideals. That country is going to be the greatest joy of every citizen there. It's going to be the holiest thing. It's the highest value that anybody could possibly aspire to, that Jewish state that's going to exist in the future. And why? Because our future country, Medinat Yisrael, is the seat of God. It's the throne of God in this world. Its entire purpose is to reveal God to the world so that everyone will know that Hashem is one. That's the highest value possible. But a And even though it's going to take a lot to get to that point, that doesn't mean that it's not the highest value. So Rav Kook sat there in the 1920s and 30s and he saw Medinat Yisrael being built. Again, he didn't live to see the day that it actually happened. And he said it's true that there's so many problems, and it's true that this is being done by people who are not observant, and some of whom are even rejecting the Torah. Many of whom are rejecting the Torah. But that doesn't matter. They are like the workers who are putting the bricks on the Beit HaMikdash. They are building with their own hands the Geula. That's their skill, and in later stages the spirituality will come, and then we're going to have this ideal, amazing country that's beyond anything humanity's ever seen. It's going to reflect God. The very existence of the country is going to reflect God's throne in this world. Question is whether the country that actually came about did that. Is Medinat Yisrael reflecting? Is it the throne of God? Is the country reflecting? We're now 70 years after the establishment of the state, over 80 years since Rav Kook passed away. And is Medinat Yisrael today representative of Torah and mitzvot? In some ways, perhaps. In many ways, it's still very lacking. So what would Rav Kook say today? We don't know, of course. But his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, turn now to page 218. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who passed away in 1982, he lived through the establishment of the state, and he lived through also the Six-Day War, those great miracles. And he also saw all the problems of what Medinat Yisrael is, and it was very clear to him that Medinat Yisrael is not exactly a country that lives completely by Torah law. So he had to deal with this not in the theoretical sense, but the practical one. And here's how he put it. Rav Tzvi Yehuda says you have to remember one thing. Our whole approach to religious Zionists is based, among other things, on the Rambam, who says that the Geula is going to happen through natural processes. It's not going to happen supernaturally. It's going to be done by people. And that means it's going to take time. It's going to be slowly. He quotes here in the first sentence, Ota hadrachat hadraga kima kima. Kima kima in Aramaic means a little bit at a time. And here what he's doing is he's referring to a very well-known Midrash Chazal. The rabbis tell us in the Talmud that a few of the rabbis were walking one day early in the morning. And they saw that as the sun begins to rise, even before the sun begins to rise, the dawn breaks very slowly. It's totally dark out, and then gets a little bit light and a little bit more light. And they were told, Kachi Geulatan Shel Yisrael Kima Kima. This is how the Jewish people is redeemed, a little bit at a time. And he says, if that's the case, that the Geulah is going to happen slowly, step by step, and it's going to happen naturally through a human process, then by definition, there are also going to be things that are not right. If everything was perfect immediately, it would happen immediately. If it's not going to happen immediately, it means that during that process, we're talking about atchalta de Geulah. We're talking about the beginning of the redemption, not the end. And a process that could take a very long time. And during that process, there are going to be, first of all, things that aren't perfect. And second of all, sometimes you even go backwards. Sometimes you take 2 or 3 steps forward and 1 step back. And that doesn't mean when there's a setback, it doesn't mean that you haven't gotten anywhere. So now let's read Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook inside. Otah hadrachata hadraga. That heavenly guidance that things happen step by step, kima, a little bit at a time. Shehi kovat et mahalach gulatam shel Yisrael l'chol tzadei ha'ma'asim ha'ruchaniyim. That process which determines all of the steps, both the material and the spiritual steps of how the Geulah is going to happen. Halo hi kolelet betocha gam et kol ha'hefsekim va'ituvim. That includes also the things that happen that make it seem like the process is halting or even going backwards. Gam et kol ha'nesigot ve'akishlonot. Also all the failures and all the things that go wrong are part of that process. Gam et kol ha'ikuvim va'sibuchim. Asher l'chol parshat ha'malach hazeh, asher l'chol shalshelet chalkei hadraga hazot. So you can't come to me and say, how can this be the Geulah? Look at all these problems. Problems are part and parcel of the process. If there wouldn't be problems, it wouldn't be the Geulah. So basically what Rav Tzvi Yehuda is saying is that when Rav Shach says, if there's so much Chilul Shabbat, how can this be the Geulah? He says if suddenly everybody would start keeping Shabbat immediately, that wouldn't be normal. That wouldn't be the Geulah. The Geulah has to happen step by step. And if it's happening step by step, that means the problems are not going to be solved immediately. They're even going to be setbacks. And people are going to even do things worse than they were doing before. It's all part of the process. So exactly what you say, Rav Shach, means this isn't the redemption, makes me say that that's exactly the proof that it is. Tofa'at dorot mufla'a zo, kol zman shelo nitmalei kol orav lo nitbager kol kocha, kol zman shelo ba'a lidei hashlamat kol tzurata v'lo higia lidei gmar shichlula. Right? Until the process reaches its final climactic conclusion, hinei b'midah zo shel ha'eder hashlama v'ashlichlul. So in the meantime, when it's not perfect, shel chesron ha'koach v'ha'or, and the light of redemption is still somewhat lacking, so that's when we see all these problems and all these things that are wrong. And therefore that requires us to get involved and fix the things that are broken. That's part of the process. And that's what makes everything stronger in the long run. The fact that there are problems means we have to get involved and fix those problems. And that's how we build something better. And that's what's going to make it really, really, really great. In the meantime, in the meantime, there are times when our independence is not complete and we act like slaves. And until the process of tshuva, which has begun and people are returning to Torah in many ways, but until the process is finished, there's still going to be sins and there's still going to be spiritual failures. Until the And until that happens, we're still going to have all the bad habits and we're going to still be absorbing the bad values from the other nations to some extent. So all of this is part of the process. Until the light shines completely brightly, there's still going to be some darkness. Skip a little bit to line 17. In the meantime. So in the meantime, until we reach the final goal, as we continue to stride forward towards the total redemption, the redemption has begun, but it isn't complete. as we continue to march forward and we're still confused and there are still problems, I'm skipping to line 20. Therefore, we need to have our full strength and our full efforts put into this process. We have to keep our eye on the goal. We have to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have to all work hard to move this process forward. So Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook very much took his father's ideas and continued to proclaim them even when he saw everything as it was developed. So that's a very different view of Medinat Yisrael. And the last source that we're going to read on page 219, and it goes all the way to 221, is Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav, as he was called in America, lived in New York. He lived in Boston, and he was the head of Yeshiva University in New York. Traveled back and forth between Boston and New York. Interestingly enough, Rav Soloveitchik, in many cases, was very, very hesitant to speak about Medinat Yisrael as the Mashiach or the Geulah. In that sense, he was different from both Rav Kooks, the father and the son. Rav Soloveitchik was very careful not to use language of this is the Mashiach. But on the other hand, and in that sense, maybe he agreed with the Lubavitcher Rebbe that we read earlier. But on the other hand, he was much, much, much more positive on the great miracle of Medinat Yisrael. And the piece we're about to read, and it's very long, so I'm not going to read every word. We'll just focus on the main points, is based on an essay he wrote in 1956. That's only 8 years after the State of Israel was founded. It's based actually on a speech he gave that year in honor of Yom HaAtzmaut. And he talks about that pasuk in Shir Hashirim that we have mentioned already a few times, Kol Dodi Dofek. Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, you may remember, is a love story between a man and a woman who love each other but don't manage always to get together. And most commentators, there's a number of different interpretations as to what that's meant to represent, but the most common interpretation is that the woman in the story, the Re'ayah as she's called, is us, Am Yisrael, we're the woman. And our lover, the man, is Hashem, the Dod. And at one point in the story of Shir HaShirim, the woman is in bed, she's asleep. And her lover comes to knock on her door. And she hears the voice, Kol Dodi Dofek, he's knocking at the door. Pitchili Rayati, he says, open up, my beloved, I want to come in. And she's half asleep, she's lying in bed, she says, oh, but I'm so tired, and I'm not dressed. How can I get up and get dressed? It's too tired. So he doesn't open the door. And after a few moments, she wakes up, what did I just do? I've been waiting for my beloved, and he was actually there. And she runs to the door and opens it up. And he's gone. So that image of the lover knocking at the door and the urgency that we better get out of bed and do our part before we lose the opportunity, Rav Soloveitchik drew on that image. And he writes here, on page 219, Sorry about that. Okay. Yes, page 219. Lifnei shmona shanim, 8 years ago, says Rav Soloveitchik, be'etzem leil balahot malei zvavot maidanek trebunkel Buchenwald, which was just a few years after the horrors of the Holocaust. Belail shel ta'i gaz v'kif shanim, that dark night of gas chambers and crematoria. Belail shel hester panim muchlat, when God seemed to be completely hiding from the world. Belail shel tun satan hasfekot v'ashmad, when it seemed that the greatest evils were ruling the world. Asher ratzal l'schov et haraya mi beitala k'nesia notzrit. It seemed as if the beloved of God was going to be kidnapped and brought to the church, right? Because Am Yisrael people were just going to give up on being Jews. Whoever actually survived. Beleil chipusim b'li heref uvakashat hadod. When she was running through the streets looking for her beloved, B'layel zeh gufo, in the middle of that night, tzaf be'ala hadod, suddenly her beloved appeared. Ha'el hamistater b'shafir chevyon hofia pitom. God suddenly appeared in the world. Think about it. 1945 was perhaps the end of the darkest period in the history of the Jewish people. Millions of Jews had been massacred in gas chambers. 3 years later, Medinat Yisrael. Suddenly, God appeared. God appeared and started knocking on her door. She was lying in bed crying, mourning over her losses, and her beloved is knocking at the door saying, open up, I'm here, I'm here. How many knocks were there on the door? I believe at least I think we can at least count 6 different knocks. And here Rav Soloveitchik is going to talk about 6 specific miracles that he saw specifically that changed before 1948 and after 1948. 6 great miracles. Even someone who was not willing to say that this is Atchalta de Geula, that this is the beginning of the redemption, says 6 huge historic things changed, and those are our beloved knocking on the door. So if he wasn't willing to call it Atchalta de Geula, he said, again, not all that different than the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but very different in his judgment of the situation, the opportunity for Geula. 6 knockings on the door, 6 opportunities, 6 incredible miracles that happened on Hei Iyar Tafshin Chet, May 15th, 1948, when the state of Israel was declared. May 14th. So what were those 6 knocks? Number 1, I'm on line 11 on page 219. Reshit, defikat hadod nishma'a b'ma'aracha politit. First of all, it was incredible what happened politically at that moment. מבחינת היחסים הבינלאומיים לא יחיש אף איש שתקומת מדינת ישראל במובן הפוליטי הייתה התרחשות כמעט על-טבעית. This is what's called the beginning of the Cold War. After World War II, there was a big struggle between the United States and the Western powers and the Soviet Union. And one of the only things that they agreed on was the importance of creating Medinat Yisrael. Russia ve'artzot ha'ma'arav, Russia and the Western countries, tamchu yachad, both together supported b'rayon yisuda shel Medinat Yisrael, shayta ulai ha'hatza'a ha'yechida shebenogea lahitachadu ha'mizrach ve'ma'arav. It was perhaps the only suggestion that the East and the West were united in. November 29th, 1949, there was a vote in the United Nations to create a Jewish state. And all these countries supported it. He says, you know what, I think, it's my inclination to think that the United Nations, the entire institution of the United Nations was created only for this. I can't see any other accomplishment that the United Nations has accomplished other than creating Medinat Yisrael. I don't know what he would have said now, some 60 years later. It's possible he wouldn't have changed his mind either. But one thing the United Nations certainly did, the world got together and voted that the Jewish people deserve a state of their own. So that's the first thing. Something politically impossible happened, and it happened in order to create a state for the Jewish people. And that, he says, was nothing other than the appearance of God in this world. There's no other way to explain it. So that's the first knock at the door. We'll skip now to page 220, line 2. Shenit, secondly, after talking about the political aspects of the matter, Defikat hadod nishme'a gam b'stei hakrav. The knocking of the beloved could also be heard on the battlefield. Chel haganah katan shel Yisrael, the tiny Israeli army at that time. Today, when you hear Israeli army, you think of a powerful military. It wasn't the case back then. We had a very small army, not so well trained, and we had almost no equipment. We had almost no weapons. Not like today when we have some of the world's best weapons. It wasn't like that back then. Chel haganah hakatan shel Yisrael, the tiny Israel Defense Force, defeated much more powerful Arab armies. Just like we say on Chanukah, that when the Maccabim defeated the Greeks, it was Rabim biyad me'atim, it was many in the hands of the few. We saw that happen in front of our own eyes also. And something even more amazing happened then. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hichbid et Lev Yishmael v'tziva alav l'tzeit l'krav neged Medinat Yisrael. The Arabs made the biggest mistakes of their lives. God, He uses the same language that the Torah uses to describe Paro. He hardened their hearts and made them run into a war that they were going to lose. Ilulei hichrizu ha'aravim milchama al Yisrael. If the Arabs had not declared war against us, had they agreed to the partition plan that the United Nations passed, we would have been left. If you know about the 1947 partition plan, and if you don't, push pause on this video, go to Google and type in UN Partition Plan 1947 and look at the map. Do it right now if you haven't, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and then come back. That map that you just saw was what would have been if there was no war. Yerushalayim would not have been part of the state of Israel. B'li chelek gadol shel Galil, and much of the Galil also. V'kama mishtit Negev. We would have had this crazy tiny country with 3 little areas that are barely connected to each other. That's what the UN offered us. That's what they voted on. The only reason we got more is because there was a war. If the Arabs would have agreed, we wouldn't have gotten those things. And similarly, ilu haya Paro lifnei alfei shana noten Yisrael latzeit mitzrayim miyad kifi bakashato rishona shel Moshe haya Moshe tzarich lamod b'diburo v'yachozer acharei 3 yamim. If you remember when Moshe Rabbeinu, when he went to Paro, he asked for 3 days. We need to go out to the desert for 3 days. Had Paro said yes, Moshe would have had to come back. What happened? Paro fought, and he fought a war, and he lost the war. We got to leave. Same thing happened here. If the Arabs would have accepted the partition plan, we would have been left with a country that was tiny little things, and not even with Yerushalayim. They fought a war and they lost. So it's a miracle that they fought the war, and it's a miracle that we won the war. That's the second knock on the door. Shlishit, the third knock, line 15. Hadod hitchil lidfok gam bepetach ha'ohel ha'teologi. Also on the theological, the religious level. You know, the Christians for centuries have been saying that because the Jewish people rejected Jesus, God rejected the Jews. If you remember when we learned the Kuzari, that's one of the things that the Christian scholar said in the Kuzari. He said to him, what do you believe? He said, well, we believe that God gave the Torah to the Jews, etc., etc., etc. But then he came back and gave the New Testament, and the Jews didn't accept Jesus. So now the people that follow Jesus are the new Am Yisrael, and the Jewish people are rejected. That's what Christians have believed for centuries. Today, not all Christians believe that anymore. And the reason, says Rav Soloveitchik, is because of what happened in 1948. Hadod hitchil lidfok gam bepetach ha'ohel ha'teologi. On the door of theology, of religion, the beloved was knocking. It could be this is the strongest knock. All the things that the Christian theologians said, that God removed all of our rights to the land of Israel. All the things that they said, that all the thing, what do they claim? We saw this, that anything it says, all the miracles promised in the future are not really talking about Am Yisrael, they're talking about the church and the Christians who are the new Israel. All those claims, nitbadu b'farhesia, were proven publicly wrong, al yidei yisud medinat Yisrael, kitanot sheker, they were proven to be false. Lies, because according to Christianity, the Jewish people has to be forever downtrodden. How could it be that after rejecting the Jews, God gave the land of Israel back to them? It proved all of Christianity wrong. And therefore, that's perhaps the greatest miracle of all. The Christians have to, and he goes on and talks about how you can't turn on, that's the next thing. Okay, so that's the third thing. The first thing was the political miracle, the second thing was the military miracle, and the third thing was the theological miracle. Revi'it, fourth, line 35. Revi'it, hadod dofek belibot hanoar hamitbolel v'hanavoch. The fourth thing is that the beloved is also knocking on the hearts of the young people who are assimilating. Tkufat hastarat hapanim bereshit shnot ha'arba'im heviel bilbul hamuchot ben hamonei ha'am ha'yehudi ve'hanoar ha'yehudi befrat. After the terrible horrors of the Holocaust, anybody who survived, particularly young people, many of them didn't want to be Jewish. Who would want to be Jewish when this is what happened to Jews? And many people wanted to just assimilate, wanted to just stop being Jewish, forget that they're Jewish, not let anyone know they're Jewish. Assimilation got stronger and stronger. And the urge to run away from Judaism and the Jewish people became very, very strong. I'm skipping to line 39, the bolded part. Pitom, but then suddenly, hitchil hadod lidfok bedaltot levavot hanevochim udefikato tkumat medinat Yisrael he'eta lefachot et halich habricha. But suddenly, the state of Israel was founded and Jews found a source of pride again. And suddenly Jews wanted to be Jewish again. And I can tell you, by the way, Rav Soloveitchik wrote this, I said, 60-something years ago. Today, when maybe the assimilation's much, much worse than it was back then, I can tell you, you girls know that I run birthright tours. I've seen it with my own eyes more than once and more than twice. Kids who barely knew what being Jewish means, come to Israel and they're blown away. And they say they want to be part of this incredible country. I think I told you a story about one girl I had on a birthright who actually decided in her 10 days in Israel that she's making Aliyah, and today that girl's a soldier in the Israeli army. A girl who had almost no connection with Judaism before she came on birthright. Crazy. So, and then he goes on and says, not only that, even Jews who hate Israel, and there are such Jews, even back then there were, and maybe they are still today, it doesn't matter. They can't avoid it. Everywhere you go, they talk Israel, Israel, Israel. You hear the whole world talking about the Jewish people, and they can't avoid being identified as Jews, and it stops them from assimilating. And this happens also today, unfortunately, in college campuses in America, when there's all this anti-Israel stuff going on the campuses, and people who are Jews who don't necessarily support Israel still find themselves on the defensive. So it's a source of pride, and sometimes it also makes people uncomfortable, but it prevents Jews from assimilating. And that's the fourth knock on the door. So again, the first knock was the political miracle. The second knock was the military miracle. The third knock was the theological miracle. The fourth, that it prevents assimilation. Line 21 on page 221. Hadafika chamishit, the fifth knock, shaladod, hi ulai chashuva biyoter. Maybe this is the most important one. Bepam rishona betoldot galutenu hiftia hashkachat sonena betaglit amarisha shedam Yehudi eino hefker. Suddenly our enemies learned that Jewish blood is not cheap. It used to be you could kill Jews and then nobody cared. This happened throughout history and certainly during the Holocaust. But now it's not true anymore. Now there's an Israeli army, and when people attack Jews, Jews fight back. We witnessed this ourselves just a few days ago. Right? Iran, a few days ago, tried to shoot missiles into Israel, and Baruch Hashem, we have an army that shot down those missiles and went into Syria and destroyed almost everything the Iranians had there. Dam Yehudi eino hefker. They didn't even manage to, Baruch Hashem, this time, to hurt any Jews. They dared to try, and Iranian soldiers are now dead. Dam Yehudi eino hefker. The Jewish people can't be. Jewish blood is not cheap, and that's the fifth great miracle. It didn't used to be that way. And finally, the last thing, line 30, had the fikah shishit shigam imena al masiach hadatenu. And the last thing we also can't forget about, nishma'a b'shat p'tichat sha'arei haaretz. Yehudi hanas me'eretz oyev yodea achshav ki yachol hu limtzo miklat batuach be'eretz havot. Now we know, a Jew knows that if a Jew is in trouble anywhere in the world, there's a place he can go to. Throughout all of history, when Jews were expelled or had to run away, they had nowhere to go. If they couldn't find a country that was willing to do them the kindness and take them in, they would be eradicated. He says, imagine if the state of Israel had existed before the Holocaust, how many Jews could have been saved from Hitler? It was too late for that. But now it's not going to happen anymore. And just after the state was founded, many Arab countries threw the Jews out, and the state of Israel took them in. And that process continued again even after Rav Soloveitchik wrote these words. All the Jews from the Soviet Union who came here from Ethiopia. In France, when there was big anti-Semitism a few years ago, many French Jews started coming to Israel. They're still coming. A Jew knows that if he's in trouble now, he has a place to go. Jews will always have a place to run if there's a state of Israel that will always accept Jews. And that's another great miracle. So Soloveitchik talks about these 6 miracles. And therefore, to sum this video up, we saw in the previous video a number of rabbis who said this cannot be the Geula, and it's not even such a good thing. And here we have rabbis who say this is a wonderful thing, it's incredibly miraculous. And at least the Torah of Kook said this is in fact Atchalta the Geula, the coming of the redemption.